Hello and welcome, everyone, to another episode of the New York Fishing Podcast. My name is George Scocca. I will be your host. I'd first like to apologize for the absence. I am a one-man band show when it comes to this podcast, so I will try and bring more timely events. In this show, in this particular episode, we speak with a member of the ASA, American Sport Fishing Association, about the recent application to make Hudson Canyon an MPA, which is a marine protected area. Now, these things are like, I don't know too much about them. Honestly, they're so, I'm going to say convoluted. I mean, they could be a million different things. They could be, okay, you can't commercial fish there. Okay, you can't recreational fish there. Okay, we're doing this to make sure that there's no drilling that's going to go on there. Why they'd ever be drilling in the canyons beyond me. But there's a lot of different reasons. So I went out and I reached out to an organization, which you don't know, but behind the scenes, these folks are out there protecting your rights as an angler. And, you know, I always talk about this, and I know folks kind of want to, you know, it's fishing. You don't want to be involved in this kind of stuff, but you have to be. If you're not, you're going to be losing out. It's your own fault. You know, I saw it before we were represented, then I saw it during representation, and now, I don't know, it seems, you know, everybody's got their own thing and their own opinion and their own platform now, and they kind of feel like that's good enough, but it's not. You have to follow up on petitions, send an email. Anyway, the bottom line is I'm going to be bringing you the interview right after this open. But I did want to mention we lost a icon in the industry, in my opinion, and his name is Chet Wilcox. He was the owner B&B Tackle out in Santa Mauritius, and he was just a great guy. He's one of the founding members of the New York Fishing Tackle Trade Association. He was a true patriot, the nicest guy. I mean, I would call him every day almost, and he'd have a joke of the day waiting for me, and it was he was always a great guy. And I just want you folks to know, this guy was out there fighting for your rights. Like, you don't know what goes on. It's the most thankless position you could ever be in. I've been there. I was there with them. But he was there, and I'm sad to see him go. He was part of generations of the Wilcox family that dated back, I believe, 3 generations. So, Chet, I know you're not going to be on a party boat up there in the sky, but I'm sure you're throwing plugs somewhere at striped bass. So I did want to talk a little bit about the fishing anyway. So it's obvious we got a lot of striped bass, a lot of big striped bass. Spoons are back. Everybody kind of acts like this is like a new fishery idea. You know, we were fishing spoons, I don't know, 40 years ago, whatever it was, but now they've made their way back. And they're accounting for a lot of big fish, but it does seem like the fish are now changing over to bait. So I think that's what's going to be happening. There's been some huge fish taken out of the West Sound. I mean, there's big bass everywhere. And now the slots are starting to filter in. So, the surprise to me anyhow are these big bluefish that are out in the West Sound. I haven't seen them here in Smithtown Bay, but I have a beautiful surprise here in Smithtown Bay, as we have a ton of fluke here. I mean, it's not a ton. I'm exaggerating, but for me, it's a ton in comparison to what I've seen the last couple of years. So, that pretty much wraps up the Sound. Then down on the South Shore, down on the North Fork, I was reading Captain Mike's report from, I don't know, one of those windy days over the weekend, and he had keeper weakfish, striped bass, and some pretty big fluke. He had a 26-incher in there. So I guess things are starting to pick up out on the North Fork. I mean, it's very encouraging. I actually saw a party boat in Smithtown Bay fishing for fluke. Been a long time since I've seen that. So, things are kind of looking up. We have the sea bass season opening up in a couple of days, I believe it is. And, the fluke fishing really does seem to be good around the island. What else can I say? Surf fishing is great. For the Sharpies who know what they're doing. They've been doing real well on big fish. So that's going to be my basic round. Oh, who could forget? The bluefin are in. They're back. Hopefully, it's going to be another season like last year. It's sure setting up to look like one. But we'll have to see what's going to happen with these bluefin. But my guess is with the amount of bait that we're seeing, those fish are going to hold here for the whole entire season once again. When I go back, think back to, 30 years ago, those fish would come in and they would stay and they would just as long as there was bait there, they would never leave. And hopefully that's what we're going to see again this season. So I'm going to move on to the interview, and I hope you folks learned something about MPAs. I know I learned a lot, and what I learned really is that I know nothing about them. And the other thing is that the process of choosing these areas will be surprising to some and kind of expected to others. With that said, Mike Leonard from the ASA. I would like to welcome Mike Leonard. He is the VP of Government Affairs over at the ASA. That's the American Sport Fishing Association. Mike, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, George. Thanks to be here. As a emerging, aspiring podcaster myself, I'm thrilled to be on someone else's podcast and be on the other end of it.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, you're going to have to tell our listeners before we get off how they can reach you, and also I'll make sure we get that up on our website. For some information to the listeners, ASA is the American Sport Fishing Association. I know many of you know of them, have heard of them, have dealt with them. Many are probably even members, but many of you don't. And I'm sure you know the ICAST show. They're behind the ICAST show, but they do a lot more than just the ICAST show. So in the saltwater fishing arena, which we all know, there's regulations and every day something's changing in our fishery and it needs to be addressed. And we don't have many advocates, and I'm not going to say he's an advocate, but they are an advocate for sport fishermen. I can tell you that. I've been a supporter and a member for the longest time ever. Even they have a few other splintered organizations, which are big, which I also join and support. And I appreciate Mike coming on here. They have a lot more knowledge. I know Mike's going to have more knowledge than I do about my biggest fear that I have spoken about for years and written about. And that's these MPAs, these zones basically that get set up by the government. We'll find out from Mike. And they pick an area and they tell you either you can't fish there or they're heavily regulated or I really don't know. And that's why I have Mike on here to explain what we can expect, because they have chosen none other than the Hudson Canyon to be an MPA. So, Mike, can you explain to us what is an MPA?
Yeah, so simple question, probably not a simple answer. And I guess first, George, I appreciate the kind words about ASA and your longstanding support. There's a lot of challenging issues out there. We try and stay on top of as many of them as we can, but there's certainly plenty in the fisheries policy space to keep us busy. A lot of it deals with, even though we do all fisheries issues from ice fishing to deep sea fishing and everything in between, the oceans are where it gets particularly complicated and contentious, and that takes a lot of different forms. But yeah, the MPA, protected area debate, has been a long-standing challenge for us, and we are not inherently against marine protected areas, because marine protected areas can mean a lot of different things. There's a lot of marine protected areas that you're allowed to fish in, where certain damaging commercial gear is restricted, or certain types of mineral extraction are prohibited. But you're still allowed to go recreational fishing. But then there's the other extreme where there's no human use allowed at all. And the problem with marine protected areas is it's a very nuanced discussion of, what is it we're trying to protect and who are we trying to protect it from? And let's figure out what the right regulations are to address what the actual problem is. But what we see is a lot of groups just sort of seize on the optics of it, that, oh, we're going to save the ocean, we're going to protect it. We don't really define what we're protecting it from or what the goals are, but we're just going to say, hey, it's a protected area. Nobody can go out there, and hopefully some good will come from it, but we're not really sure what that'll ultimately look like. Those are the ones that we're really worried about. And we've seen this happen in different parts of the country. I mean, this is like a global issue that's going on all over the place. But, in the U.S., our fisheries are pretty well managed in general. There's still some challenges. Northeast cod and elsewhere, we've still got some stocks that are not in great shape. But in general, we've got a pretty good fisheries management system that makes sure we're not overfishing and that overfished stocks are rebuilding. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than most other parts of the world, where just going in and drawing lines on a map and saying, hey, you can't fish here, that's really not, in most cases, the right science-based way to go. California, there was a big debate a decade or so ago that's starting to come up again, where the state went in and created over 100 marine protected areas all along the coastline, all without really any scientific basis. We would ask the state, what fish stocks is this going to benefit? What fisheries are overfished that we need to close fishing down to protect? And they really couldn't identify any. It was just a political debate, not a sound science-based management debate. So that's what we worry about is, this idea that may have some merit. It may be a tool in the fishery management toolbox, ends up getting hijacked and used, frankly, for fundraising purposes for environmental groups to act like they're doing some good, but not actually, doing a positive policy action for the environment. So, it takes a lot of different forms. And it's just something we have to look at a case-by-case basis and constantly remind policymakers that, if you're going to explore something like this, it needs to be a transparent, science-based process with clear objectives and goals. And ultimately, the end goal should be to get rid of the marine protected area, because it's accomplished protecting and restoring whatever it was intended to protect. And therefore, we can allow people to go back in and fish again. But, it ends up being in all different parts of the spectrum of what's allowed, what's not allowed, and how good it is.
All right, so
it's a complicated challenge.
So do they take in advice from the other fisheries management people that are out there, from ASMFC, from NIMS? Do they take, any of the councils, or that they just kind of look at a chart, as you had said, and kind of put a circle around it? Because here we are, Hudson Canyon, right? So I don't know. To me, why would that be a marine protected area? Thing goes, 1,000 feet. You've got pelagics in there. It's not like there's going to be any draggers, or there's never going to be drilling, or there's not really any type of commercial fishery out there that I can think of. I guess maybe the tilefish fishery, I don't know. But, so that's my fear. It's like, first of all, who decides the area, right? Why do they pick that area? So, what is the end game? What are the goals? What are they trying to accomplish? Like, when, for the sake of striped bass, or for just any type of fishery, we'll say scup, okay, we're trying to bring the biomass level to this number, so we know why. We may not agree with it, but we know why they're doing things. So, but with this MPA, to me, it could take so many different forms. And who makes the decisions? Do they set up separate boards for this thing?
Yeah, so it really varies depending on what type of MPA we're talking about and who's in charge of it. Now, the Hudson Canyon one it's being proposed as a subset of, MPA is like the big umbrella that all these different things can come out in. You got marine reserves, you've got wilderness zones, you've got sanctuaries. So there's all these different types of marine protected areas.
Interesting.
Of which marine sanctuaries is like a formal program within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. That is, again, it's a subset of what could be considered a marine protected area. And honestly, of the marine protected areas that are out there, marine sanctuaries tend to be the most recreational friendly. There's about 15 of them around the country. Probably the most notable is all along the Florida Keys, out to a few miles. Most of that is the National Marine Sanctuary. There are several off the California coast. There are some shipwrecks that are designated as marine sanctuaries. Each one's a little different, what its intended purpose is, why it was designated, how big it is. Like the ones off California, they're most of the exclusive economic zone off the northern coast of California are in some sort of marine sanctuary. And that was really done just because they didn't want oil and gas development out there. Marine sanctuaries prohibit oil and gas development.
Right. Or they regulate it. They might allow it if they feel like it, but
yeah, actually, so like in the authorizing, the statute that designated the sanctuary program, there are certain activities that would never be allowed in sanctuaries.
Okay.
Oil and gas development is one of them. But fishing, especially recreational fishing, I think the stat is something like 98% of all National Marine Sanctuary waters allow recreational fishing in some form. So not all, but most. And in general, sanctuaries tend to just adopt whatever regulations, if they're in state waters, whatever the state has adopted. If it's in federal waters, whatever the councils have adopted. So again, that's not always the case. Like in the Florida Keys, there are some additional like closed areas, spawning closures, that type of thing that go above and beyond what other fishery management entities would designate. But, compared to, again, what we see in other types of marine protected areas, like in California, where in coastal California, the process I was talking about earlier, where they just created 100 or so of these all on the coast and banned fishing. Marine sanctuaries tend to be a little bit different. So it's not guaranteed that recreational fishing will be allowed, but that's certainly the hope. And so the Hudson Canyon proposal came about. So the Wildlife Conservation Society, it's affiliated with the New York Aquarium, put forward a nomination for Hudson Canyon to be a National Marine Sanctuary. And that's the way, so over the last few years, the National Marine Sanctuaries program has created a nomination program where different entities, either states or academic institutions or nonprofits, can nominate a site to become a marine sanctuary. So it still has to go through a pretty arduous process from there, but that just is sort of what gets the ball rolling. And that's really where we are right now. So this site has been proposed, it's a nomination that that the National Marine Sanctuary System has said, is worthy of consideration. So they're going to sort of get the ball rolling to explore eventually designating. And it would be, a 2 to 3 year time frame, just all the public comment periods and review they've got to do and all that. But if you look at what the package of the nomination, I'm not saying we're totally out of the woods, but what's being proposed is to designate it as a sanctuary more for prohibiting oil, gas, mineral extraction, which to your point may not be feasible anyway, but this gives you a permanent, depending on where technology goes in the future, it wouldn't happen later. But a lot of it's more for like a public outreach awareness. A lot of what they talk about in the nomination is working with local communities, schools to expand ocean education and awareness. And if you got this designated as a sanctuary, it sort of gives Hudson Canyon a above and beyond sort of the optics of this place is so special it is now a marine sanctuary.
So I don't know. I think I find some irony in here in that we have an aquarium that's got all these animals in there that they're doing whatever the heck they're doing, keeping them captive, no matter what you say. They're the ones that are advising what we should do to make things better. I just see some irony in that, but I can't help that. But so basically, it's a crapshoot for us. And let me explain one thing to you. You probably know this, but you may not. But in New York, we have a saying, what happens in California happens in New York. Mm. And, things...
That's scary.
It's true. I mean, I think we fight amongst the two to be the highest tax states in the country, right? We're not going to get too deep into the woods with that. But the fact is, what happens there eventually does happen here. And so, and what you said is there's like 100 dots. Because I looked at that map and I was like, oh my God, there's like MPA dots like up and down the coast everywhere. And there's also some favorite fishing spot. They lost a lot of recreational fishing areas that they enjoyed.
That was the whole thing, is like they wanted to go in and protect the best habitat. Well, guess what? That's where the best fishing is.
Right.
So,
right.
They said we only protected 16% of coastal waters. Well, guess what? That's the 16% that's the best place to fish. There's plenty of flat, sandy bottom for you to go fish that you're not going to catch anything in. But that's the magnitude of the problem is greater than that.
We've got so many things that we're up against here, which I'm sure you know. Yeah, when I say up against, I mean, look, this year But, you got to take the good with the bad. This year we went down a half inch in New York on a fluke, which was good, but the sea bass season stayed the same. We're kind of getting hit over on that. I don't think our regulators are taking into account that we have some kind of transition going on. Fisheries are moving north. It's pretty obvious. But of all of them, at least we've got input. We've got advisory boards. There's people which we speak to that we've known for years that know the process. But when I hear, that someone like NOAA is going to come in and say, that's a spot, and you're going to do whatever we say you can, it's a little bit scary. So, and when you open a door, other doors open. It just happens that way. So they literally. So you think it's possible that it would just be for environmental reasons, and we'll still be able to go out there and fish there. I don't see why we wouldn't be able to fish that area for the life of me. But
yeah, well, it's possible. I mean, optimistically, I think that's. To me, that looks like where this one's headed. We can't take that for granted. So right now there's a public comment period that I think runs till August 8th, something like that, something in early August, for people to just comment on the sort of the scope of this proposal. That I would encourage listeners to provide comments and feedback on the importance of continuing to allow, should this go forward, to continue to allow recreational fishing to happen. Because that's the indication right now. Again, if you read the nomination, it states that fishing should continue in this area. It praises the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council for how it's managed fisheries. There's no indication that they're trying to supersede existing regulations, but we can't take that for granted. So there's a comment period right now. As I mentioned, the process, if it goes through this site nomination process, will be a 2 to 3 year long thing with several opportunities to comment. But it's really important for anglers to make their voice heard loud and clear from the outset, that if this goes in any sort of different direction where we're starting to restrict recreational fishing arbitrarily, then that's going to be a huge problem for our community. So we really need to make sure our voice is clear early and often.
I'll get a link up. I'll get a link up on the website with some type of a sample letter that can be sent.
Yeah, and we don't have one up now, but you mentioned other programs within ASA. We've got an angler advocacy site called KeepAmericaFishing.org, where we will have a comment, what you're talking about, like a form letter, where people can go and it'll make all the arguments. You can edit the letter if you want. But get it submitted that way to try and make it a little easier for folks too. Yeah, we'll try and get something up quickly to make that as easy as possible. Because, like I said, it's not a guarantee. The sky doesn't look like it's falling right now, but if we're not vigilant on it, this could go in a very bad direction. Yeah, well, that's why I'm trying to get out in front of it. It's so quiet here. The problem we have is years ago,
there was no social media. People had to unite to be heard. Now they get on the Facebook page, they send something out to their 250 friends, and they think that they've helped, but they haven't. So we need more people join the ASA. We need all of you tackle shops out there. This is a group you definitely want to get involved in.
Unless your 25 friends are members of Congress or Atlantic States Marine Fishery Commission commissioners or serve on the council. We need to get to the policymakers and decision makers here.
Okay, well, I'm sure we have plenty of prime subjects listening. We just got to get them off their butts. And if losing Hudson Canyon doesn't do it, I mean, because that's all the money, costs a few bucks to get 65 miles offshore, especially nowadays. So we need to get them vocal.
Well, and that's where, again, even if this sanctuary moves forward, because like I said, right now it's really just focused on prohibiting oil and gas development, using this as an opportunity for education. Yeah, there'd probably be some research funding that comes along with this. So there's not really much of a regulatory component to it. But like I said, it doesn't take much for things to go in a different direction. You just need some environmental groups to hijack it and say, we need to ban everything in here, and then suddenly we're in a different position. So that's why, again, we need to stay on top of it.
I totally agree that they need to know out of the gate how we're going to react to these type of things, because we all know this isn't the only one. So if they see us roll over with this one, we're going to see dots around Long Island. And let me tell you, it's hard enough to fish around here as it is, but we don't have a lot of access. Yeah. So the least thing we need.
You mentioned what happens in California goes to New York. That was maybe the only good thing that came out of California is they almost served as martyrs for the rest of the country, because while we didn't have much success out there in defeating those protected areas, we made it a really ugly, messy process. And not many people have looked at that and said, we want to replicate that and do that all over again.
That's
Where
the plan.
To that point, like we, a few years ago during the end of the Obama administration, some listeners may remember, and this is still going on, but further north, there's a New England Canyons National Marine Monument, which is another different type of area that was designated. And that allows recreational fishing in it.
Right.
And that was a result of a lot of advocacy from ASA and many others to make it clear, if you ban recreational fishing, this is going to be a political nightmare for you. Don't do what California did. So, but again, we gotta keep that message going loud and strong.
Okay, great. So, Mike, I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate the work ASA is doing. Maybe you want to tell people how to get your podcast?
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we'll probably have this, maybe, George, you and I can reverse roles. I'll interview you about Hudson Canyon. But yeah, we've got a podcast called The Politics of Fish that just started. It's available everywhere you can find podcasts. That's sort of an insider's look into some of what we're talking about here, the policy that goes into fisheries regulation and access and outdoor recreation in general.
Okay, that's great. And once again, folks, remember the ASA. And as you can see, they're out there working. Well, you're out fishing, and I get it. Believe me, I know the last thing you want to think about is trying to fight for something while you're fishing. But while you're fishing, there's people like this that are in the background protecting our rights every day, all day. So, Mike, I appreciate what you do. It's not the most, it's a pretty thankless position in many cases. And I always wonder why I did it years ago. But
yeah, you gotta look for wins real carefully, because they don't come often.
Yeah.
You gotta take them where they do come.
Exactly. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you. Please pass along my best to the team over there, and I wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, George, and be back anytime. And we're happy to stay in touch. And as I said, this goes forward. Share information with listeners through Keep America Fishing and otherwise of how they can engage. This is a really important one, and we need everyone to speak up. So thanks again for having me on.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks again for coming on. Well, there you have it, folks. I hope you're not more confused. Just kidding. Make sure you check out the website link, which we're going to have, Mike's going to send that to us, and I'm going to get that up on the website. So you really do need to voice your opinion on this. We need to send a message right away. I'm sure you heard, if you listen to the whole thing, California has 100 of them. I thought it was only 40, but he mentioned 100. Yes, some of them you can fish, some of them you can't. I mean, it just seems to me to be such totally politically based and not science-based. I just don't see why the aquarium would make a recommendation as to what areas of the earth that we're allowed to fish. But in any case, make sure you follow up with it, follow up on the website. We need to send a clear, concise message. So when they come to us and say, all right, we're going to make the Fire Island Reef a MPA, and nobody's going to be allowed to fish on it, don't be surprised. I have a few guests that will be on my next show that are from California, and they talk about the many instances where they lost, fertile fishing ground. So this is an issue to keep on top of. I will bring you more of it in the future. And speaking of the website, make sure you stop by, make a post, read the knowledgeable editorial content, which we have there. We've got a lot of good fishermen there. It's not the Wild Wild West. It's you don't have to worry about going in there and posting a question and have somebody say, oh my God, what are you, an idiot? You don't know how to tie a Palomar knot? Oh, you got to be a jerk while you're in this group. We don't do that here. We're all about friendship, and we're all about catching fish. So please stop by nyangler.com and sign up so you can receive our weekly newsletter. So I will be back again ASAP. I don't want to make any promises because every time I do, I'm late. So, but I am going to get back. If you folks think it's good where I just kind of give an outline report and, have one guest, I can probably put one out every week. So, but I'm curious to see, what you think. And if there's anybody out there that has suggestions, wants to pitch in, I don't know, please reach out to me. It's George at nyangler.com. That's George at nyangler.com. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for listening. Please be sure to subscribe. If you check off whatever you're using, there's a way to check off a subscribe button. Be sure you do that, and then you get a message when the new podcast goes out. I mean, I know a lot of you are doing it because as soon as the podcast goes out, bang, we're getting a bunch of listens. So, but make sure you do that. And please be safe out there on the water. Keep only what you need and enjoy the great fishing we have here in New York.
Thank you for listening to the New York Angler Podcast. You can find more on fishing New York waters at nyangler.com, your secret spot online.